Welcome to this explainer. Today we're embarking on a high-stakes clinical journey from basic anatomical assessment all the way down to life-or-death surgical emergencies. The neck is a complex, incredibly dense area of human anatomy, and diagnosing a lump here requires a really structured, deductive approach. So we're going to treat this like a masterclass, starting wide with spatial mapping and narrowing our focus down to split-second decisions at the bedside. All right, let's quickly hit our agenda for this masterclass. We'll map out the anatomy of complex neck swellings, investigate the thyroid gland, classify major thyroid cancers, walk through the Dapsicamp diagnostic framework, tackle high-stakes neck surgery post-op emergencies, and wrap up with avoiding malpraxis and negligence. Jumping right into Section 1, navigating complex neck swellings through anatomical mapping. So we're starting at the widest part of our diagnostic funnel. 85% of neck swellings are actually just lymph nodes, but that other 15%, that's where we go on a really complex diagnostic hunt. Just dividing the neck into spatial triangles instantly narrows down our differential diagnosis. For instance, if you've got a patient under 20 with a midline lump, you're probably thinking dermoid cyst. But if we shift to the anterior triangle, right between the midline and the sternocleidomastoid muscle, and you feel a pulsatile mass, that could be a carotid body tumor. And what if there's a pulsatile expansal swelling lower down in the posterior triangle? Well, that points straight to a subclavian artery aneurysm. We even see things like cystic hygromas in the posterior triangle of infants, which, by the way, brilliantly transilluminate under light. Location is absolutely everything here. Once we've nailed down exactly where the lump is, we need to see how it behaves. Just asking the patient to swallow or stick out their tongue completely separates thyroid-related masses from stationary structures. Take a thyroglossal cyst, for example. It's a fluid-filled sac left over from the thyroid's developmental migration path. Because of that, it actually moves up on the tongue protrudes. Things like salivary glands, carotid body tumors, or branchial cysts, they don't move at all. Moving on to Section 2, investigating the thyroid gland specifically, focusing on the physical exam. Now that we've isolated a potential thyroid issue using location and movement, let's take this straight to the bedside. The absolute crucial point here is executing these 3 steps flawlessly. Step 1 is inspection. You expose the neck, look for obvious goiters, surgical scars, or even signs of Graves' disease, like pretibial myxedema on the lower legs. Step 2 is the swallow test. You literally hand them a glass of water and say, sip, hold it in your mouth, and swallow, all while you're carefully watching the midline. And finally, Step 3, the tongue protrusion test. Missing even a subtle upward movement during this step could send your entire diagnosis totally off course. All right, Section 3, classifying major thyroid cancers, the oncology breakdown. If our physical exam, ultrasounds, or fine needle aspirations point to malignancy, our clinical funnel narrows sharply. We've got to quickly categorize the threat using the rule of 5 for thyroid cancers. Notice how papillary and follicular make up the vast majority, 85% combined. Papillary generally affects younger patients and tends to spread to lymph nodes, whereas follicular hits middle-aged patients and spreads early through the blood to the bones and lungs. Anaplastic is rare, mostly seen in the elderly, and sadly has a notoriously poor response to treatment. But what's really fascinating here is the 5% of medullary cases. These are neuroendocrine tumors arising from C cells that produce calcitonin, and they require a much deeper genetic understanding on our part. Because medullary thyroid cancer is so often tied to multiple endocrine neoplasia or MEN syndromes, we can't just look at the neck. We have to look at the whole patient. MEN2A pairs this thyroid cancer with adrenal pheochromocytomas and parathyroid hyperplasia. MEN2B goes even further, adding mucosal neuromas, which are these little bumps on the lips, cheeks, and tongue, along with a marfanoid appearance. The key here is that both of these involve mutations in the RET proto-oncogene. Identifying this specific mutation is absolutely critical, as it sometimes necessitates prophylactic thyroidectomies in children before they even turn 3 years old, basically removing the thyroid before cancer ever has a chance to form. That brings us to Section 4, the Dapsicamp Diagnostic Framework, an endocrine masterclass. Thyroid disease is, of course, just one piece of the massive endocrine puzzle. So zooming out from the neck for a second, let's apply the DAP portion of the systemic Dapsicamp framework to Addison's disease, which is primary adrenal insufficiency. Its structures are thinking perfectly. The definition is Addison's. The etiology in the developed world is primarily autoimmune adrenalitis, though globally we definitely have to consider tuberculosis. And the pathogenesis? Well, we can clearly see how autoimmune destruction obliterates 3 distinct zones of the adrenal gland, the zona glomerulosa, fasciculata, and reticularis. This just completely wipes out the body's mineralocorticoid, glucocorticoid, and androgen safety nets. It's a truly brilliant way to map out systemic disease.
Moving right into Section 5, neck surgery post-op emergencies, the high-stakes crisis.
Bringing our focus back to the neck, let's look at the post-operative period, where literally seconds dictate survival. I want you to imagine your call to the surgical ward. You've got a patient who had a routine thyroidectomy just hours ago, and now they are suddenly struggling to breathe. Their monitors are alarming. Why is this specific type of post-operative bleeding so instantly lethal? The anatomy here is just totally unforgiving. The pretracheal fascia in the neck has absolutely zero room to stretch, none. So when a slipped ligature or a missed vessel starts bleeding into this confined space, the trapped blood immediately crushes the venous return. This venous congestion causes the larynx to swell incredibly fast, a process called laryngeal edema. Within moments, the airway snaps completely shut, leading to asphyxiation.
This is an absolute emergency. You do not wait for imaging. You do not wait for the elevator. You do not transfer the patient. You literally remove the skin clips and deep layer sutures right there at the bedside. You open the wound to release the pressure and suction the hematoma to save their life. It's a brutal, high-pressure intervention, but any hesitation here means death.
Finally, Section 6, avoiding malpraxis and negligence, the medical legal reality. Failing to act correctly during those split-second emergencies, or failing to properly investigate a neck lump using the steps we talked about earlier, brings us face-to-face with the harsh medical legal reality of our profession. The absolutely crucial point to understand here is the difference between a tragic mistake and an intentional violation. Malpraxis involves intentional, disgraceful behavior that falls completely outside the bounds of what a governing body considers acceptable. Medical negligence, on the other hand, happens when a generally prudent physician engages in an act of omission, like, say, forgetting to check vocal cord function before surgery, or an act of commission, which inadvertently results in harm to the health seeker. Medical governing bodies strictly monitor specific historical warning signs for malpraxis, notoriously grouped together as the 6 A's. These include improper association, unethical advertisement, practicing under the influence of alcohol, adultery with patients, and illegal abortion practices depending on your regional laws. Engaging in any of these can instantly destroy the sacred physician society bond and invite severe penalties, completely ending a medical career. Ultimately, the anatomy of the neck leaves zero room for error, from identifying a subtle thyroglossal cyst to ripping open sutures at the bedside to restore a crushed airway. Clinical excellence is required at every single stage. It leaves us to wonder, when the pressure spikes and a patient's life is entirely on the line, will your structured examination save them, or will it become a tragic case study in medical negligence? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and definitely keep that question in mind the next time you step onto the ward.